My wife, Clara, has a specific kind of calm. It's not the placid, gentle calm of a still lake. It's the focused, hyper-aware calm of a bomb disposal expert. A quiet that exists at the very center of a storm. For 10 years, I'd known her only as a voice on the other end of a phone call at the end of her shift. A voice scraped raw with a weariness that went bone deep. She works in a world of perpetual crisis, a windowless room filled with the ringing of phones that are never good news. My world, as a work-from-home graphic designer, is one of color palettes, client feedback, and the quiet hum of a computer. We were two different worlds seeking a single, shared sanctuary. We found it, or so we thought, in Oak Haven Estates. It was the quintessential quiet suburb, a place of mature oak trees, well-tended lawns, and the promise of peaceful Saturday afternoons. Our house was a modest but beautiful mid-century ranch, a place with good light and a large private backyard that was perfect for my gardening projects. It was our fortress of solitude, the place where Clara could finally unplug from the city's endless scream for help, and I could escape the tyranny of deadlines. For the first 2 weeks, it was everything we had ever wanted. The silence was profound, a healing balm. That silence was shattered by a woman who seemed to generate her own personal weather system of low-grade fury. She appeared at our front door on our second Saturday, while I was wrestling with the assembly instructions for a new barbecue grill. She was in her late 50s, with a helmet of stiff, blonde hair and eyes that performed a swift, critical audit of our front porch. Finding it wanting, she held a clipboard like a weapon, her knuckles white. "I am Eleanor Vance," she announced, her voice a sharp, brittle instrument. "President of the Oak Haven Homeowners Association. I'm here about the violations." "Violations?" I asked, straightening up, a smudge of grease on my cheek. "We just moved in." "Precisely," she sniffed, her gaze falling on the large, flat-packed cardboard boxes from the grill, which I had neatly stacked by the side of the house for recycling day. Article 7, Section D of the Oak Haven Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions explicitly forbids the exterior storage of refuse, packaging materials, and other unsightly items. It's a blight on the aesthetic continuity of the neighborhood. Before I could respond, the front door opened, and Clara stepped out. She had that post-shift look on her face, a deep, cellular exhaustion, but her voice was preternaturally calm. "Good morning," she said, her eyes taking in the woman on our porch with a single, comprehensive sweep. "I'm Clara. Is there a problem?" Eleanor seemed momentarily thrown by Clara's quiet, steady presence. She puffed herself up. "I am Eleanor Vance, the HOA president. And yes, there is a problem. Several of them." She pointed at the boxes, then at the small, decorative flag I had placed in our new flower bed, the flag of my favorite baseball team. "And that," she sneered, "is a non-sanctioned display. Article 12 forbids any flags other than the American flag or approved, seasonal decorative banners." Clara didn't look at the flag or the boxes. She looked directly at Eleanor, her head tilted slightly. It was a look I knew well. It was the look of a professional assessing a situation, stripping away the emotion and getting to the facts. "So, your concern is the temporary placement of some cardboard boxes during a move-in, and a small, personal garden flag," Clara said, her voice a calm, even monotone. It was her work voice, the one she used to de-escalate hysterics and cut through chaos. "Is that the full extent of the issue at this time?" The phrase "at this time" seemed to catch Eleanor off guard. It was the language of officialdom, of procedure. "For now," Eleanor snapped, clearly flustered. "You will find we maintain very high standards in Oak Haven. I suggest you read the bylaws I left in your mailbox. You have 24 hours to rectify these violations, or a fine will be issued." She turned and marched away, her back ramrod straight. I let out a long, frustrated sigh. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I muttered. Clara watched her go, her expression unreadable. "Okay," she said, her voice still in that low, professional register. "Subject is a female, late 50s. Presence as highly agitated and confrontational. Establishes authority through immediate citation of rules. Whether valid or not, motivation appears to be a need for absolute control over her environment." She turned to me, and the dispatcher persona receded, replaced by my tired, gentle wife. "Let's put the boxes in the garage." "Honey," she said with a weary smile, "it's too nice a day to start a war." But I had seen the look in Eleanor Vance's eyes. The war had already started, and she had no idea that she had just tried to intimidate a woman who spent 40 hours a week talking people through the worst moments of their lives. A woman whose entire profession was about bringing order to chaos. One calm, clear, and authoritative sentence at a time. Our initial strategy for dealing with Eleanor Vance was one of cautious, meticulous compliance. Clara, whose entire professional life revolved around following procedure to the letter, insisted on it. We give her no legitimate reason to target us. "Ben," she'd explained, as we leafed through the ridiculously thick book of Oakhaven bylaws, "we will be the most boring, rule-abiding residents this neighborhood has ever seen. We will build a baseline of perfect conduct. That way, when she inevitably escalates, her actions will stand out in stark relief against our own." It made sense, but the sheer, mind-numbing pettiness of the rules was a daily assault on my sanity. We dutifully moved the grill boxes into the garage. I sadly removed my baseball team's flag from the garden. We had officially rectified our initial violations. This, of course, was not enough for Eleanor. Her victory had only whetted her appetite for more. The violation notices began to appear in our mailbox with the grim regularity of a ticking clock. Each one a small, perfectly legal dose of poison. The first was a $50 fine for our mailbox being the wrong shade of black. The bylaws stipulated a semi-gloss black, whereas our mailbox, according to the attached, zoomed-in photograph, was clearly a satin finish. The notice informed us that we had 7 days to repaint it or face a daily penalty. "Is she serious?" I asked, staring at the notice in disbelief. "How can she even tell the difference?" "She can't," Clara said, taking the notice and placing it in a new, thick binder she had labeled Oakhaven HOA, Incident Log. "But she doesn't have to. The rule is subjective enough to be unenforceable in a real court, but perfect for a campaign of harassment. She knows most people will just pay the $50 to make it go away." We didn't pay. Instead, I spent the next afternoon repainting the mailbox with a can of HOA-approved, semi-gloss black paint. I took before and after photos, which Clara attached to a polite, formal letter, notifying the board that the violation had been remediated. We were building our file. The fines became a blizzard of absurdity. We received a citation for the ornamental grasses in our front yard being 3 inches taller than the maximum allowable height of 24 inches. I spent a Saturday giving my garden a haircut with a pair of shears and a tape measure. We were fined for our welcome mat being made of an unapproved coir fiber blend. We replaced it. We received a notice that the small, solar-powered pathway lights leading to our door were an unapproved lighting fixture design, and that their soft, warm glow was not in harmony with the cool white temperature mandated for all exterior lighting. With each new infraction, my frustration grew. But so did the thickness of Clara's binder. She was a master of documentation. Every notice, every letter we sent, every receipt for the new welcome mat or the approved light fixtures was logged, dated, and placed in a clear plastic sleeve. "What are we even doing this for?" Clara, I asked one evening, after receiving a violation for our garden hose being coiled in what Eleanor deemed to be an aesthetically displeasing, asymmetrical pattern. "This is insane. We're just letting her bully us." "We're not letting her bully us, Ben," she said, her voice calm and steady as she made another entry in her log. "We're letting her build our case for us. In my job, when you have a repeat caller who is tying up emergency lines with non-emergencies, you don't just block them. You start a file. You document every call. You build a pattern of behavior. That's what we're doing here. We are building a clear, undeniable, and official record of targeted harassment." It was during this period that I got a clearer glimpse into the sheer, crushing stress of Clara's world. I was in her home office one day, looking for a book, when I noticed her training manual for new dispatchers lying on her desk. I picked it up and began to read. There were chapters on identifying the signs of a caller in clinical shock, on the phonetic alphabet, on the legal requirements for dispatching officers to different situations. But the chapter that chilled me to the bone was titled "Managing Malicious and Hysterical Callers." It detailed the protocols for dealing with swatting incidents, where a person calls in a fake, high-stakes emergency, like a hostage situation, to trigger a massive, armed police response at a victim's address. It spoke of the dispatcher's duty to listen for the subtle vocal cues of a liar, the signs of a manufactured crisis. I closed the manual, a new, profound understanding of my wife's daily reality settling over me. She spent her days navigating a world of life and death lies. And now, she was being forced to navigate a world of petty, soul-crushing ones at home. Eleanor Vance thought she was engaged in a simple neighborhood dispute. She had no idea she was applying her amateurish brand of psychological warfare to a woman who was a seasoned, professional expert in the field. Having failed to break our will with her relentless campaign of petty fines, Eleanor Vance escalated her tactics from the bureaucratic to the physical. The war of paper had been a nuisance. The war of property damage was a violation. The attacks were small, deniable, and calculated to inflict the maximum amount of psychological damage, to make our sanctuary feel unsafe and corrupted. The first incident was an attack on my garden, the one place on the property that was truly my own. I had spent weeks building a series of raised garden beds in the backyard, filling them with rich, dark soil, and planting rows of heirloom tomatoes and herbs. It was my quiet, creative outlet. I came out one morning to find the beds in ruins. The young, tender plants had not just been trampled. They had been systematically ripped out, their roots exposed, and tossed aside to wither in the morning sun. In the middle of the central bed, a single, ugly garden weed had been planted, a mocking, defiant flag on a conquered territory. There were no footprints on the damp soil, save for my own. The perpetrator had clearly been careful, likely reaching over the low fence from the common area behind our house. It was an act of pure, pointless cruelty. I stood there, my heart a cold, hard knot in my chest, a feeling of utter helplessness washing over me. Clara, however, was a rock. She came out, took one look at the devastation, and her face hardened into the calm, focused mask of her professional self. "Okay, Ben," she said, her voice the steady, procedural tone of a dispatcher managing a scene. "Don't touch anything. We need to document. Get the camera. I want wide shots from all four corners, then close-ups on each bed. Get down low and see if you can get any detail on the soil disturbance." She was treating our small, ruined garden like a crime scene. And in doing so, she was giving me back a sense of control. We were no longer just victims. We were investigators. We spent the next hour taking photographs, logging the time, documenting the extent of the damage. Every photo, every note, went into the thick, growing binder. The sabotage continued, each act a little more brazen than the last. The small solar-powered pathway lights we had been forced to buy to replace our non-compliant ones were smashed. Their plastic casings shattered, their small solar panels cracked. The new HOA-approved welcome mat vanished from our front porch. A few days later, we saw it in the community dumpster, stained and torn. Each time, the act was deniable. The lights could have been hit by a rock thrown from a lawnmower. The mat could have been taken by a neighborhood prankster. But we knew. It was a campaign of 1,000 tiny, cowardly cuts. The most unnerving incident was the escalation to our house itself. We came home one evening after being out for dinner to find that one of our backyard sprinklers had been turned on full blast. Its head deliberately twisted to aim directly at the foundation of our house. A huge, muddy pool of water had formed, and the water was beginning to seep into the crawl space. It was a subtle, insidious act of vandalism, one that could cause thousands of dollars in long-term damage from mold and rot if we hadn't caught it. That was the night Clara's calm finally broke, just for a moment. After we had shut off the water and spent an hour with buckets and fans, she sat down at the kitchen table, her face pale and drawn. "She's trying to destroy our home. Ben," she whispered, her voice trembling with a fury she so rarely showed. "This isn't about rules anymore. This is evil." The next day, a discreet but powerful security system was installed, with cameras covering every angle of our property. Clara took the lead, her questions to the installer sharp and specific, focused on encrypted storage and the legal admissibility of the footage. Our home was no longer just a sanctuary. It was an evidence locker. Eleanor thought she was operating with impunity, a ghost in the suburban machine. She had no idea that her every move was now being watched, her every act of malice being recorded by a silent, unblinking witness. She was no longer just harassing a quiet couple. She was building a criminal case against herself, and the lead investigator was watching her from the other side of a camera lens. With her campaign of covert vandalism failing to produce the desired result of our surrender, Eleanor Vance shifted her attack to a new, more public front. If she couldn't make our home physically uninhabitable, she would make it socially uninhabitable. She launched a vicious and methodical slander campaign on the Oakhaven Neighbors app, a private social media platform that she ruled with absolute authority. Her goal was to isolate us completely, to turn us into neighborhood pariahs, and to create a public justification for her escalating harassment. The first post was a masterpiece of manufactured concern, a friendly reminder to all Oakhaven residents to please be mindful of your neighbors, she wrote, her use of exclamation points like a series of small, sharp jabs. "We've had some reports of a certain new family on Oak Street being very hostile and uncooperative when approached about simple bylaw matters. It's so important that we all work together to maintain the peaceful and friendly character of our community. A little kindness goes a long way." In a single, passive-aggressive paragraph, she had painted us as angry, aggressive troublemakers. The comments from her loyal followers, a small but vocal clique of neighborhood gossips, were immediate and fawning. "Is it the new people in the Henderson house? They seem so secretive. I tried to say hello the other day, and they barely looked at me. So rude." The narrative she was weaving was a complete inversion of reality. Our calm, Procedural responses were being twisted into hostility. Our desire for privacy was being framed as secrecy. The slander grew more personal and more dangerous. She began to focus on Clara's unconventional work schedule. It's very unsettling to have neighbors who keep such strange hours. She posted a week later, cars coming and going at all times of the night. One has to wonder what they're hiding. It's a legitimate security concern for our community. This was a particularly insidious attack. Clara's strange hours were the grueling, rotating shifts of an emergency dispatcher. The cars coming and going was her arriving home, exhausted, from a 10-hour shift of saving lives. Eleanor was twisting my wife's selfless public service into something sinister and threatening. The digital campaign had a real and chilling effect. The few neighbors who had been neutral now treated us with undisguised suspicion. Our quiet walks around the neighborhood were now met with curtains twitching in windows and doors quietly closing as we approached. We were being actively shunned, isolated by a wall of lies and paranoia that Eleanor had so skillfully constructed. It was during this time that the full weight of the situation began to settle on me. I saw the toll it was taking on Clara. She would come home from a shift spent dealing with the city's chaos, only to be met with this petty, personal chaos at home. The cabin was supposed to be her refuge, but it had become a battlefield. "Look at her language. Ben," she said one evening, scrolling through the app with a look of grim, professional analysis on her face. She's using emotionally charged keywords: safety, security, strangers, hiding. She's deliberately trying to incite a fear-based response from the community. It's a classic tactic to create a public pretext. She's building a justification in the public mind for whatever she's planning to do next. I had to do something. I couldn't just let Clara fight this alone. My moment came when I ran into one of Eleanor's key supporters, a woman named Carol, at the local grocery store. I decided to try a direct, reasoned approach. "Carol," I said, my voice calm and friendly. "I'm Ben Miller, from down the street. I think there's been some misunderstanding, and I'd love a chance to clear the air." She looked at me as if I were a piece of filth on her shoe. "I have nothing to say to you," she sneered, loud enough for others in the aisle to hear. "Eleanor told us all about you. You people are a menace." She turned and pushed her cart away, leaving me standing there, my face burning with a mixture of humiliation and fury. My attempt at diplomacy had failed spectacularly. I had tried to reason with a member of a cult and had been excommunicated for my troubles. I went home and told Clara what had happened. She looked at me, her eyes filled not with pity, but with a new kind of respect. "You were brave to try, Ben," she said, "but you can't reason with an echo chamber." She looked out the window, her jaw set. She's successfully isolated us. She's established her narrative. Now she's going to feel emboldened to make a more official move. She's going to try to use a legitimate authority to validate her lies. She was right. Of course. The war of words was over. The next battle would be with the law. Having successfully isolated us within the community and established her false narrative, Eleanor Vance escalated her campaign to its next logical stage. She sought to legitimize her personal vendetta by weaponizing the authority of the police. It was a dangerous, arrogant move, a sign that she believed her own lies and felt completely untouchable. Her first attempt was a call to the non-emergency police line. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was working in my home office, and Clara was sleeping upstairs after a grueling night shift. The doorbell rang, and I found two uniformed police officers on our doorstep. One was an older, seasoned-looking sergeant, and the other was a young rookie who looked barely out of his teens. "Sir," the sergeant said, his tone polite but firm. "We've received a noise complaint from this address. Something about loud construction work during prohibited hours." I blinked. The only sound in the house was the gentle hum of my computer. "Officer," I said, "I'm a graphic designer. I work from home. There is no construction work here. My wife is a shift worker, and she's sleeping upstairs. The house is completely quiet." The sergeant looked past me into the quiet house, then back at me. He had the weary look of a man who had responded to 1,000 bogus calls in his career. "I see," he said. He was about to leave when Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, roused by the doorbell. She was in her robe, her hair a mess, her face etched with a deep, profound exhaustion. "What's going on, Ben?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. She came down the stairs and saw the officers. Her entire demeanor changed in an instant. The sleepy, vulnerable woman vanished, replaced by a calm, hyper-aware professional. "Officers," she said, her voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. She walked to the door, not with the defensive posture of a resident being questioned, but with the steady, confident air of a peer. "I'm Clara Miller. This is my husband, Ben. I can assure you there has been no noise here. I work nights. I was asleep until you rang the bell." The rookie officer seemed flustered by her calm, direct gaze. The sergeant, however, was studying her, a flicker of professional curiosity in his eyes. "I'd appreciate it if you would log this incident as a Code 415 unfounded," Clara continued, her voice still perfectly even. "And if you wouldn't mind. Sergeant, please make a note in the premise history for this address. This is the latest in a pattern of harassment from our HOA president, Eleanor Vance. We are documenting all incidents." The sergeant's eyebrows shot up. A civilian quoting police codes and talking about premise histories was highly unusual. He knew he wasn't dealing with an average homeowner. "You seem to know the procedure, ma'am," he said, his tone shifting from dismissive to respectful. "I've had some experience with it," Clara said with a small, tired smile. The officers left, and I knew that a seed had been planted. Eleanor's attempt to use the police as her personal goons had backfired. She had inadvertently put herself on their radar. Her next move was more dangerous. A few days later, my brother came to visit. He parked his perfectly normal late-model sedan on the street in front of our house. Within an hour, a police car, this time with its lights flashing, pulled up behind his car. An officer got out and began to approach our house with his hand on his holstered weapon. Clara saw it happen through the front window. "Stay here. Ben," she said, her voice a low, urgent command. She was out the front door in an instant. She met the officer on the lawn. He was a young, jumpy officer I didn't recognize. "Ma'am, I need you to step back inside," he said, his voice tight with adrenaline. "We've had a call about a suspicious vehicle, possibly involved in a recent series of burglaries in the area." "Officer," Clara said, her voice that preternaturally calm dispatcher's tone, the one that could talk a man down from a ledge. "I understand you are responding to a call, but I need you to take a breath and listen to me. That vehicle belongs to my brother. He is a guest in my home. The call you received was almost certainly placed by Eleanor Vance, who lives at 134 Oak Street. She is the subject of an ongoing harassment file. Your sergeant is aware of the situation. I suggest you radio your dispatch and have them confirm the premise history for this address before you proceed any further." Her calm, her use of procedural language, her sheer, unshakable authority completely disarmed him. He stared at her. then back at his car, then back at her. He keyed his radio. We couldn't hear the response, but we saw the tension drain from his shoulders. He let out a long sigh. "My apologies, ma'am," he said, his voice now laced with embarrassment. "Dispatch confirms the flag on the address. I'm sorry to have disturbed you." He got back in his car and drove away. Clara stood on the lawn for a long moment, her back to me. Her shoulders were slumped, and I knew that this victory was also a profound defeat. Eleanor had now escalated to using the police to create a potentially life-threatening situation. The game had changed, and Clara knew that the next call wouldn't be to the non-emergency line. It would be to 911. The final, desperate escalation came on a quiet Tuesday evening. It was the culmination of Eleanor Vance's failed campaign, a move born of pure, undiluted rage and a profound, narcissistic injury. All her other weapons, the fines, the vandalism, the slander, the police had been skillfully neutralized by Clara's calm, procedural defiance. She had nothing left in her arsenal but the nuclear option, a direct, physical threat designed to shatter our sense of safety and breach the final boundary of our home. The confrontation happened at our front door. The sun had just set, painting the sky in soft shades of lavender and gray. We were in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when the doorbell rang. A sharp, insistent series of jabs. I opened the door to find Eleanor Vance on our porch. She was not alone. Behind her stood two large, thuggish-looking men in generic work coveralls whom I'd never seen before. They were holding crowbars. Her face was a pale, tight mask of fury, her eyes burning with a zealot's light. "This is your final warning, Miller," she hissed, foregoing any preamble. "You have been a blight on this community since the day you arrived. You and your wife." She spat the word like a curse. "Eleanor, you need to leave our property," Clara said, coming to stand beside me. Her voice was steady, but I could feel the coiled tension in her body. She was no longer just my wife. She was an officer of the peace, off duty, but facing a direct and credible threat. "I am not leaving," Eleanor sneered. "I am here on official HOA business. I have received a credible report of a severe gas leak originating from your property. A smell of mercaptan. As per the emergency provisions of the bylaws, I have the right to demand immediate entry to inspect and ensure the safety of the community." It was a brilliant, evil lie. There was no gas leak. It was a fabricated pretext to force her way into our home. "There is no gas leak, Eleanor," Clara said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "You are not entering our home. If you have a genuine concern, you can call the gas company and the fire department, and we will be happy to cooperate with them. But you are not coming in." Eleanor let out a short, ugly laugh. "I knew you'd be uncooperative," she said. She turned to the two men behind her. "The homeowners are refusing a mandatory safety inspection. You may have to force the door." The two men took a step forward, hefting their crowbars. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was no longer a game of notices and nasty posts. This was a direct threat of a violent home invasion. Clara moved. She didn't step back. She stepped forward, positioning herself squarely in the doorway, her body a physical shield. The exhausted, quiet woman was gone, replaced by a figure of pure, unshakable authority. "Listen to me very carefully," she said, her voice no longer calm and de-escalating. It was cold, hard, and resonant with the absolute command of someone who had faced down armed men and talked jumpers off bridges. You are currently attempting to commit felony, breaking and entering. These men are accessories. If you take one more step, I will consider it a direct threat to my life and the life of my husband, and I will respond with the force necessary to neutralize that threat. The two thugs hesitated, clearly unnerved by her sudden transformation, by the steel in her voice. Eleanor, however, was too far gone in her rage. She saw Clara's stand not as a warning, but as the ultimate act of defiance. Her face contorted, and she pulled out her cell phone. "You want to play hardball?" she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Fine. I'll find a way in. I'm calling 911 right now. I'm going to tell them there's a violent domestic dispute in here. I'm going to tell them you're holding me hostage. They'll kick down your door for you. We'll see how you like that." It was the final, unthinkable line. She was threatening to swat us, to use the emergency response system as her own personal battering ram, a potentially lethal act of malice. Clara just stared at her, her face a mask of ice. The last shred of the quiet, peaceful neighbor had been burned away. In her eyes, I saw the protector, the guardian of that thin, fragile line between order and chaos, realizing that the chaos was now at her own front door. "Go ahead, Eleanor," Clara said, her voice a quiet, terrifying whisper. "Make the call." The quiet of our living room was a stark contrast to the storm that had just broken on our doorstep. Eleanor had retreated, spitting a final venomous promise to make us pay, her two hired thugs trailing behind her, like confused, defanged dogs. The immediate threat of violence was gone, but it was replaced by a new, more insidious tension. The threat of her phone call hung in the air, a sword of Damocles suspended by a single, digital thread. I was pacing, my heart still a frantic drum against my ribs. What do we do? Clara! She's going to do it. She's going to call them. Clara was not pacing. She was sitting at the dining room table, her laptop open, her movements calm and deliberate. She was no longer my wife. She was a commander preparing a battlefield. "Yes," she said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "She is." "Shouldn't we call them first?" I asked, my voice rising in panic. "Warn them. Tell them she's a lunatic." "No," she said, her voice a low, steady anchor in my sea of anxiety. "That's what she wants. She wants chaos. She wants a confusing, he said she said situation where the responding officers have to make a split-second decision. We are not going to give her that." She turned the laptop towards me. On the screen was a schematic of the county's 911 dispatch system, a complex web of color-coded call queues and unit assignments. For the past month, since her harassment started escalating, I have been building a premise history file for this address. It's a flag in the CAD system, the computer-aided dispatch. It's linked to every previous call she's made, every unfounded report logged by the officers who have responded. I've attached my entire incident log, the photos, the video clips. I briefed my shift supervisor and the patrol sergeant for this district 2 weeks ago. They know everything. I stared at her, a profound sense of awe washing over me. While I had been stewing in anger and frustration, she had been quietly, methodically building a digital fortress around us. "She thinks she's calling 911, Clara said, a grim, hard look in her eyes. "She thinks she's a random, hysterical victim reporting a crime. But when her call comes in, the system will immediately flag it. The dispatcher who takes the call will see everything in an instant. The pattern of harassment, the previous false reports, the flag for a malicious, unstable caller. She closed the laptop. She thinks she's lighting a match. She has no idea she's doing it in a room filled with gasoline she has poured herself. We waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The quiet of the house was no longer peaceful. It was charged, expectant. Then, from Clara's home office, we heard it. A familiar, two-tone chime. It was the sound her work computer made when a new, high-priority call was routed to an available dispatcher. Clara stood up. She looked at me, her face a mask of calm, professional resolve. "She's made the call," she said quietly, "and it's been routed to me." She walked into her office and closed the door. A moment later, I heard her voice. But it was not her voice. It was the voice I had heard on the phone 1,000 times. The voice of the anonymous, calming presence in the storm. 911. What is the address of your emergency? I could hear the tinny, frantic squawking of Eleanor's voice on the other end of the headset. And then I heard Clara. Her voice, a piece of ice. Her words, the calm, procedural steps of a trap being sprung. "Yes, ma'am. I understand. You're reporting a violent disturbance. You say he has a weapon. I see. Can you describe him for me?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm dispatching officers to your location now." I watched through the front window. On the street, I could see Eleanor standing on her own lawn, her phone pressed to her ear, a look of wild, triumphant glee on her face as she watched our house, expecting the imminent, violent arrival of a SWAT team. Then I heard Clara's voice again, no longer speaking to Eleanor, but speaking into the secure radio channel to her officers. And the words she spoke were not the words of a dispatcher sending help to a victim. They were the words of a commander delivering a final, devastating judgment. "Dispatch to all Oak Haven units." Her voice crackled, clear and cold. "Respond code 2 to the vicinity of 125 Oak Street for a suspected 8T53.5 malicious and false reporting of an emergency. The reporting party is Eleanor Vance, a white female, late 50s, currently standing on the front lawn of 134 Oak Street. She is the suspect. I have her live on a recorded 911 line, actively fabricating a violent felony in progress at my location. Premise history confirms a pattern of targeted harassment. I want a supervisor on scene. Proceed with caution, and take the reporting party into custody." The reversal was absolute. The weapon Eleanor had chosen to destroy us had been turned, with surgical precision, against her. The system she had tried to abuse was now being wielded by its master. I watched as 2 patrol cars rolled silently down our street, their lights off. They didn't stop at our house. They glided to a halt in front of Eleanor's. She was still on the phone, her face contorting in confusion, as the officers got out and began to walk calmly, purposefully, towards her. Her triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a look of dawning, horrified comprehension. She had called for the thunder, and the lightning had just struck her down. The aftermath was a quiet, satisfying execution of procedure. The arrest of Eleanor Vance, mid-911 call, on her own front lawn, became the defining, cautionary legend of Oak Haven Estates. The responding officers, led by the very sergeant who had taken Clara's initial harassment report weeks earlier, handled the situation with cold, professional efficiency. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The recorded 911 call itself was a full confession. And Clara's meticulously compiled binder provided the deep, damning context of a long-term, malicious campaign. Eleanor was charged with a felony for knowingly filing a false police report of a violent crime. a charge that carried serious prison time due to the potential for a swatting incident to turn deadly. The story of her arrest, and the revelation that her intended victim was one of the county's senior 911 dispatchers, was a minor sensation in the local news. Her carefully constructed world of power and intimidation evaporated overnight. The Oakhaven HOA board, horrified by the scandal and facing a potential lawsuit from us for negligence, acted swiftly. In an emergency session, Eleanor was removed as president and stripped of all her committee positions in disgrace. A new, far more reasonable group of residents was elected, and their first official act was to send us a formal, written apology and to nullify every fine and violation Eleanor had ever issued against us. Faced with a mountain of evidence and public humiliation, Eleanor pleaded guilty. Given her age and lack of a prior record, she avoided prison, but was sentenced to 2 years of strict probation, mandatory psychological counseling, and a hefty fine, which went to the county's emergency services fund. She put her house on the market a month later and moved away. A quiet, ignominious end to her reign of terror. The peace that settled over our house in the following weeks was a deeper and more profound quiet than we had known before. It was a peace that had been tested, threatened, and ultimately hard-won. Our neighbors, once so quick to shun us, were now sheepishly friendly. Their waves and smiles a silent apology for having believed the lies of a manipulative woman. I sit on our back patio now, my garden replanted and thriving, and watch Clara as she reads a book in the warm afternoon sun. The lines of exhaustion on her face seem a little softer. The quiet she has found here is real now, a sanctuary, protected not by walls or fences, but by her own quiet, indomitable strength. Her job, the source of so much stress and weariness, had become the very shield that protected our home. She is a guardian, a calm voice in the chaos, and I have never been more proud of her. The house is silent, save for the gentle rustle of the oak leaves in the breeze, and it is the most beautiful sound in the world.